When my cousin General James was serving overseas, our power-hungry HOA president took the opportunity to bulldoze his historic family home, but she didn't expect him to come back early with a U.S. senator on speed dial. Would you believe that her petty property complaint got half the HOA board dragged into federal court and turned our quiet neighborhood into a national scandal about veteran rights? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you enjoy Karen and HOA stories. I'll never forget that morning I caught Karen Matthews snapping photos of my cousin's house. She didn't even try to hide it, just stood there in her designer workout gear tapping away at her phone with those perfectly manicured nails. The same hands that had voted to approve her husband's construction deals were now recording what she claimed were violations at James's place. "Excuse me, Karen, but what are you doing?" I asked, walking toward her, coffee still in hand. I'd been watching her circle James's colonial house like a vulture for 15 minutes from my kitchen window. "Oh, good morning." Her fake smile could have shattered glass. "Just documenting some major maintenance issues. The paint is clearly 2 shades off from the official HOA color list. And these hedges," she waved dramatically at the perfectly shaped bushes my cousin's daughter and I trimmed every weekend. "They're at least half an inch above code." I took a deep breath, remembering James always told me to keep my cool. Karen, James is literally serving the country. He's a general, and this home has been in our family for 4 generations. "The paint was approved 3 years ago by the last board. Rules change, dear," she said, typing something on her phone. "And deployment isn't an excuse for lowering property values. Did you know the new community center plan could raise home values by 30%? That was the first I'd heard of any community center." I watched her keep snapping pictures, my stomach twisting as I remembered the last 3 neighbors who fought her all ended up with surprise liens on their homes. I spent that whole afternoon digging through every HOA document I could get my hands on, hidden in the meeting notes from last month. There it was, a proposal for a fancy new community center right on our block, right where James's home stood. The next week flew by with certified letters piling up at James's door, each one citing more absurd violations. The brass knocker that lasted 2 world wars was now somehow not approved. The rose bushes his daughter planted before he left were labeled invasive species. I tried calling James, but military contact was restricted during this mission. All I could do was email and hope he got them in time. Every day more board members drove by, slowly taking notes. I put up cameras after I caught Karen's husband measuring the property line at midnight with a flashlight. The final straw came when I saw Karen showing a group of suited investors around our street. "This entire area will be transformed," I heard her say, "and those outdated homes will be cleared, starting with that eyesore." She pointed straight at James's house. That night I called James's daughter Sarah at college. "Something's not right," I said. "I think they're planning something big, and your dad being away makes his place an easy target." "But Dad's supposed to be home in 2 weeks," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "They can't just take our house, right? All our photos are their mom's garden." Everything I wanted to promise her it'd be okay, but Karen had already beaten 3 homeowner lawsuits. She knew exactly how to work the system. Just then another certified letter showed up. The HOA was holding an emergency meeting tomorrow to vote on the community center proposal. My heart dropped when I read the fine print. They scheduled it exactly 13 days before James's return, 1 day short of the required 2-week notice for deployed service members under federal law. Karen had done her homework, and I realized with growing fear this wasn't just about upgrades or home values. This was calculated. She had been plotting this for months. I locked up James's house that night, unable to shake the fear that these might be the final hours. This house was ours. On the wall, a photo of James getting his first command caught my eye. "He taught me battles are won with strategy, not just strength." As I walked back home, Karen's porch light flipped on. She stood there in a silk robe with that same cutting smile. "Better get some pictures," she called sweetly, "for the memories." Little did she know I was already planning my own counterattack. I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery rolling down the street. At 6:30 a.m. through my window I saw 3 yellow bulldozers and a huge dump truck heading straight for James's house. My heart started racing as I threw on my shoes and grabbed the folder of legal documents I'd kept close since Karen began making threats. The morning fog hadn't even lifted when I ran outside, still in pajamas. Karen was already there in her designer workout gear, tapping on her iPad with that fake smile she always wore. 2 police cars were nearby. She'd clearly planned all this. Stop, I yelled, running over with James's deployment papers in hand. This house belongs to an active service member. You can't do this. My hands were shaking as I held up the power of attorney James gave me. Karen just laughed and kept tapping. Oh, sweetie, she said without even looking up. The board held an emergency meeting last night. We voted unanimously to move forward with immediate demolition due to severe structural issues. She finally looked at me, her eyes cold. It's all perfectly legal. We even have a city inspector's report. I felt sick. What inspector? When I've been here every day. The demolition crew chief came over. Looking uneasy, I shoved James's property tax receipts at him. Look, everything's paid up. They can't do this. Karen stepped in. Actually, we haven't received any tax payments in 6 months. Such a shame, she said, pulling out a thick folder. We sent multiple notices. Maybe they got lost in the mail to wherever your cousin is stationed. My hands trembled as I pulled up my phone banking app. There they were, 6 canceled checks to the HOA, all cleared by their bank. You cashed these checks. I have proof right here. Karen waved her hand dismissively. Those were applied to other outstanding violations. See these reports: overgrown grass, unauthorized paint color, non-compliant mailbox height. She kept listing absurd violations while the bulldozer engines got louder. I called James's lawyer, pacing on the sidewalk. Pick up. The call went to voicemail. The police just stood there saying they couldn't interfere with a civil matter. I felt helpless as the crew started setting up their gear. Neighbors began coming outside, curious about the noise. Most hung back, but old Mrs. Chun from next door came over, phone raised, recording it all. I remember when James's grandparents built this house, she said loudly, right after he returned from Korea. The whole neighborhood pitched in. Karen gave her a dirty look, the bulldozer's claw raised, and I couldn't stop the tears. Just then my phone rang, James's smiling face in uniform on the screen. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. Hey cousin, he said cheerfully, you won't believe this, but I caught an early flight, just landed, thought I'd surprise everyone. I stared at the bulldozer creeping toward his front porch where we'd sit and drink lemonade, the porch swing where his daughter learned to read, the window where his wife spent her last days. James the first choked. You need to get here right now, Karen. She's there, about to. The crack of splintering would cut me off as the claw took its first bite out of our family history. Behind me, Karen was on her phone too. Yes, honey, they're starting now. Make sure your crew's ready to break ground next week. The permits, don't worry about those. I've got everything covered. The roar of the bulldozer drowned out everything else as I watched my cousin's life getting ripped apart, praying he'd arrive in time. What I didn't know was Karen's flawless plan was about to backfire in ways none of us saw coming. I'll never forget how the sunlight caught the general stars as James stepped out of my car. The bulldozer driver turned white, frozen at the controls midway through, demolishing our grandparents' bay window. That beautiful stained glass our grandmother chose in 1962 lay shattered across the lawn like broken dreams. Karen was giving a speech about community progress to a small crowd when she spotted James. Her perfectly styled hair seemed to deflate as he walked right past her without a glance. The only sound was his dress shoes crunching on broken glass and splintered wood. I watched my cousin, who'd faced warlords and terrorists, bend to pick up his daughter Emma's first ballet trophy from the debris. The plastic dancer snapped in half. He tucked it into his uniform pocket, his face calm but his eyes burning with a quiet fury I'd only seen once before when he got news of his wife's cancer. Ma'am, he said to Karen with such military formality it made her flinch. I believe you're standing on my property. He pulled out a weathered document from his briefcase. This land deed dates back to 1947 when my grandfather returned from World War II. I'd like to know when exactly the HOA got the right to demolish it. Karen tried to recover, waving her HOA papers like a shield. The board's decision was unanimous. General, your cousin was informed. We have all the proper documentation. But James held up his hand and she froze mid-sentence like a schoolgirl caught sneaking a text. He took out his phone, pressed one number on speed dial, and waited. The neighbors leaned in, not wanting to miss a word. Bill, yes, it's James. Remember our talk about local government overreach, he said calmly, his eyes locked on Karen. Well, you Won't believe what I'm standing in front of right now. Yes, that property, the one my grandfather left me, the one covered under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. Karen's face drained of color as he said the words, but it was what he said next that made her clutch her designer purse like a life raft. Yes, Senator Williams, the first think your committee would be very interested in how the HOA handled this. He paused, listening, and nodded. Bringing the press is very thoughtful of you, Bill. See you soon. The demolition crew was already backing off, muttering something about lunch breaks and clerical errors. Karen's husband Tom, the same guy who bragged about his company's guaranteed contract for the community center, couldn't stop staring at the ground. James walked the perimeter of the wreckage, phone in hand, taking photos. He stopped in what had been his daughter's room. The walls still stood, but the roof was gone, her space posters flapping in the wind like little white flags. Emma's NASA bed sheets were tangled with splintered wood and broken tile, and I had to look away, sir, someone said quietly. I turned and saw Sarah from 3 doors down, always too shy to speak up at meetings. I have videos, she said, voice shaking. They started before sunrise. Ignored your cousin's legal documents. She looked at Karen, then away quickly. I heard her talking last night, said it had to be done before you came home. More neighbors stepped forward, then offering their phones, their emails, copies of letters. It was like the whole block had been holding its breath, and now everyone was speaking up. Stories of threats, fines, and intimidation spilling out like floodwater. James nodded and thanked each one, jotting down names and numbers with the precision of a field op planner. It was clear he hadn't just returned to a ruined home, he'd come back to a battlefield. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Karen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face turned to ash. Local news had picked up the story. Decorated general's home demolished during deployment. HOA under investigation. James squared his shoulders and turned to the crowd, now larger and holding up phones. My grandfather built this house after fighting for this country. He taught me some things are worth defending, even if the fight's in your own backyard. He smiled, but there was no joy in it. I do believe the real estate lawyers are about to arrive. Karen, I hope your bookkeeping's in order. I spotted Karen's Mercedes peeling out of her driveway without her designer purse, which still sat on the broken front steps. But James wasn't finished yet. He had that same look I'd seen before every time he walked into hostile territory. Now, he said quietly, pulling out another paper, let's talk about those construction contracts awarded to board member relatives over the last 5 years. I never thought I'd see 6 news vans wrestling for curb space on our sleepy street, but that's what happens when you target the wrong general. The morning ended with Senator Williams himself striding up our driveway like it was the Senate floor. He took one look at the damage and didn't hesitate. Get me the state attorney general. He barked into his phone. Now Karen came running out in her silk bathrobe, looking like the ghost of a scandal. This is a private HOA matter, she whined, but no one was listening. 2 police cruisers pulled up, and I saw her stumble when the officers began taking pictures. James pulled out the folder I'd been guarding all week. Inside were copies of every check he sent the HOA and certified mail receipts confirming delivery. Funny how those payments got lost, he said flatly. The detective, jotting notes, didn't find it funny at all. Then came the real twist. A young intern from the senator's team sprinted over, clutching documents. Sir, you need to see this, she said, breathless. The records showed Karen's husband's company. The construction company had won the bid for the community center 3 months ago, before the HOA had even voted on the project. The reporters had a field day, with one discovering that Karen had sent violation notices to 3 other deployed service members' homes in the past year. Another found out she tried to force an elderly couple out the previous summer, claiming their garden gnomes were destroying property values. James stood in the middle of it all, still in his uniform, helping the forensics team salvage what they could from his destroyed home. He didn't rage or yell like Karen, who was now screaming at her husband on the phone in her driveway. Instead, he carefully placed each recovered photo and piece of metal into evidence bags, telling the story behind each one to the growing crowd of neighbors who had come to support him. That's when Karen made her biggest mistake. She marched over, waving a thick HOA rulebook. Page 394 clearly states that the board has emergency powers to remove hazardous structures, she shouted. The crowd went silent. James turned to her slowly, and in that moment, I saw why he'd risen to the rank of general. Karen, he said quietly, My great-grandfather built this house after returning from World War II. He used his own 2 hands to lay these bricks you just crushed. Tell me, what was the emergency? She opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water. The cameras were rolling and everyone waited. Then Bill, who had been our mailman for 20 years, stepped forward. I have something you all need to see, he said, pulling out his phone. He'd taken a video yesterday of Karen and her husband walking around James's property, measuring and marking spots. They were talking about where the gym would go, Bill said. This was before any vote had happened. The state attorney general himself arrived just as Karen's husband pulled up in his Mercedes. He took one look at the scene and tried to drive away, but a police car was already blocking his exit. Inside his briefcase, they found the real smoking gun, blueprints for the community center, dated 2 months before James's house was even marked for demolition. But Karen had one last desperate card to play, and none of us saw it coming. She pulled out a document that made James's face turn white. In his hand was something that could change everything, but that twist would have to wait. The crowd of neighbors grew larger, news helicopters circled overhead, and in the middle of it all, James's teenage daughter Sarah arrived home from school. She stood at the edge of what used to be her bedroom, clutching her backpack, and asked the question that would break the internet. Dad, where are all my letters from when you were deployed? I watched Karen's face turn ghost white as the FBI agents walked into the emergency HOA meeting. She tried to grab her designer purse and run, but they had already blocked both exits. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide her panic as they started reading emails from her personal laptop. The emails showed how she'd been hiding James's tax payments for months while her husband's construction company prepared to build the community center. This is ridiculous, Karen screamed, jumping up from her chair. We followed all the rules. But then, Agent Thompson played the recording from her phone call with the demolition company. I don't care if the paperwork isn't final yet, tear it down before he gets back. We'll sort out the details later. The whole room gasped. Mrs. Johnson, who had lived next door for 20 years, started crying. You told us he'd abandoned the property, she said to Karen. You said his taxes hadn't been paid in years. James stood quietly in the corner, still in his uniform, holding his daughter's cracked ballet trophy. He hadn't said a word since the agents arrived. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. The FBI had found everything: fake violation notices, backdated board meetings that never happened, and even checks from James that Karen had hidden in her home office. The local news crews outside were having a field day. TR President faces federal charges, and veteran property scheme were already running across the bottom of every TV screen in town. Senator Williams had made sure this story wouldn't get buried. But the biggest shock came when they arrested Karen's husband at his office. It turned out the community center plans included luxury condos that would have made them millions. They'd been planning this for years, targeting homes of deployed service members who couldn't fight back. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, reporters, and building inspectors. 7 HOA board members faced criminal charges. Karen and her husband were looking at serious prison time for fraud and violating the Service Members Civil Relief Act. They had messed with the wrong family. But the real victory wasn't watching Karen being led away in handcuffs or seeing her house go up for sale when they couldn't afford their fancy lawyers. It was watching our community come together to make things right. Veterans from 3 states showed up with tools and supplies. Local businesses donated materials, and even the mayor came by to help lay the foundation for James's new home, the colonial-style house Karen had hated so much. The Historical Society fast-tracked its protection, along with 6 other veteran-owned properties in our neighborhood. Today, I'm sitting on James's new front porch, watching his daughter Sophie practice ballet in the yard. The house looks almost exactly like the old one, but better, built with love by people who understand what service and sacrifice really mean. There's a new wall in the kitchen where Sophie's height marks are growing, right next to the shadow box holding pieces of the old house we managed to save. Karen's community center never happened. Instead, that land became a memorial park honoring local veterans. Sometimes, when I walk by, I see families having picnics where Karen wanted to put her luxury condos. Sophie loves the playground equipment donated by the same construction companies that turned down Karen's sketchy contracts. James never brags about how he brought down a corrupt HOA board. He just smiles when new neighbors ask about the small piece of his old front door hanging beside his metals. It's a reminder, he tells them, that home is worth fighting for. The FBI investigation is still ongoing, and they've found similar schemes in other neighborhoods. But here's the thing that really gets me. Last week, I saw Karen's son helping at the Veterans Food Bank downtown. He looked me in the eye and said, "I'm sorry for what my parents did." Maybe that's the best victory of all, knowing that sometimes justice comes with a chance for healing. I never expected our story to change so many lives, but that's exactly what happened after a video of Karen's arrest went viral. My phone started ringing nonstop with calls from military families across the country, sharing similar HOA horror stories. James looked at me over his morning coffee and said, "We need to help them all." The news crews might have packed up and left our street, but we were just getting started. With James's military connections and my experience documenting Karen's schemes, we created the Homeowners Defense Alliance. Every week, more veterans joined our cause, sharing their own battles with unfair HOA boards who tried to bully them while they served overseas. Karen's replacement on the HOA board, a retired Marine named Mike, discovered something interesting in the old files. Our neighborhood wasn't the only target. Karen's husband's construction company had been eyeing properties in 3 other military communities. Each time, the same pattern: suddenly strict enforcement of minor violations, lost paperwork, and quick demolition votes while homeowners were deployed. I watched James transform our dining room into a command center, with maps showing HOA trouble spots across the state pinned to every wall. The senator who helped us started drafting new laws to protect military families from predatory HOA practices. They named it the Matthews Act. Oh yes, we made sure Karen's name would be forever linked to the solution, not just the problem. The real surprise came when Karen's teenage daughter visited us one afternoon. She was crying, clutching a box of old photos she'd saved from our dumpster before the demolition. "Mom never told me these were in there," she whispered, handing James a dusty album of his daughter's baby pictures we thought were lost forever. Sometimes good things come from unexpected places. Last week, we celebrated the first victory of our Homeowners Defense Alliance. A young Army nurse in Texas called us after her HOA tried to fine her $100 per day for a flagpole her late father installed before she deployed. James made some calls, I drafted some letters, and suddenly that HOA board wasn't so brave anymore. The flag still flies, and now there's a precedent for others to follow. Remember that community center Karen wanted so badly? The land sits empty now, but not for long. James donated it to create affordable housing for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. The first families move in next month, and guess who volunteered to help them settle in? Karen's daughter. She says she wants to make things right. People ask me if I'm still angry about what happened. Honestly, I'm grateful. Without Karen's greed, we might never have discovered how many other military families needed help. We might never have built this amazing community of supporters who look out for each other while our heroes serve overseas. And James's daughter might never have learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes losing your home helps you build something even better. Speaking of James, he just walked in with another stack of case files and that determined look in his eyes. There's a retired Navy SEAL in Florida whose HOA is trying to ban his service dog, and well, let's just say Karen taught us exactly what to do about bullies who mess with the wrong veterans. Want to guess how this one ends?